Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, my first video. Wow, it's really kind of weird. Today I'm going to be doing my 13 favorite books of 2020. All year, I've kind of kept an ongoing list on my phone because I knew I wanted to pick some unspecified number of books that were my favorite at the end. So yeah, have a lot to do, have a lot to talk about. Before I get into it, I just want to say, let's all just be respectful. These are my opinions. My opinions don't invalidate yours, and yours don't invalidate mine. So let's all just be nice. We're all doing the best we can. Let's get into it. So these are not in any particular order besides the fact that the first 3 are 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then the rest of them, the other 10, are 5 stars. I guess the 4.5 stars just weren't as perfect. The first book I do not have a physical copy of, and that is Beach Read. Beach Read. I read Beach Read not so long ago, and this past year I've been trying to get more into adult romance. I haven't read a whole lot of them, so I read it and I loved it. I did not expect to love it as much as I did, but I did. The basic premise is there are 2 struggling authors who spend the summer as neighbors on a lake, and they basically form this pact to where they're going to try each other's genres, and romance ensues. I really loved them. The reason I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars isn't so much as there was something that retracted from my reading experience, more so that I don't have enough of a gauge as to how to rate romance novels, and I didn't feel like I could give it a 5 and be confident in that. I gave it a 5 on Goodreads, but I don't know, so I gave it a 4.5. But I really enjoyed this book. It was very fun. I laughed out loud so many times. It was hilarious. It was sad. I sobbed. I ugly cried really hard for a long time reading this book, and that's because it struck a personal emotional chord within me. This book made me really hopeful for the future, so I'm excited to read more adult romance. If you have any recommendations, let me know. The next book is Vengeful, the sequel to Vicious, which I absolutely loved. Unfortunately, I did not love this one quite as much as I loved Vicious. I don't know if it was just because, I don't know why. Really, I don't know. So the premise for Vicious and this series overall is that it focuses on villains. The first book really delved into the 2 main villains' relationship and backstory and how they came to have their superpowers or supernatural abilities. The characters are so rich and complex, and all of the different family, friendship dynamics between them really are touching and intriguing. It was refreshing to read a book about villains. There's nothing I love more than a well-developed, intriguing, complex villain. In my notes for this book, I actually wrote, everything came together and fell apart so well. And yeah, I think that's a good way to describe how things go in this book. We get some new characters, new point of views that I really enjoyed. There wasn't as much from the 2 main main villains as I would have liked. I still enjoyed their chapters and the chapters told from other characters. And I just love V. Schwab, I will buy anything she puts out. She's just a master at storytelling, in my opinion. I just love her so much. Her writing is beautiful and enamoring. Is that a verb? I don't know, but that's how I would describe it. So, okay. That paid me to do. Next book is A Feast for Crows. God, can you see it missing behind me? You probably can. But Feast for Crows, which is the 4th novel in the Song of Ice and Fire series. So ever since I first watched Game of Thrones a long time ago, not that long, like 3 or 4 years ago, I obviously wanted to read the books. Ever since I got them, I've read, I think, at least 1 book every year. I think the first year I had them, I read 2. The first 2 in the summer. Then last year I read A Storm of Swords, and this year I read A Feast for Crows, and I read them in the summer. They're my summer read. Mainly because, do you see how big they are? And it takes a lot of mental energy to read these. It really does. It's quite time consuming. So I read them in the summer when I have plenty of time. I have nothing to worry about. I really enjoyed A Feast for Crows. It was very good. I found this one and A Storm of Swords, but especially this one, to be more surprising because if I remember correctly, the first 2 books are very true to the show, like pretty much exactly as the show happens, is what's in the books. But in this one especially, it's starting to deviate from the show, so it's more surprising. And so it's more interesting to me. I mean, it's interesting anyway, but it was more interesting. I did miss a couple of the characters. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I'm sorry if I am wrong, this one and A Dance for Dragons happens at the same time. And so this one has only certain characters' point of views, and then A Dance for Dragon has the other ones. So my favorites were missing from this book. If anything, I found it to be better because there were less people to have to keep track of, but I did miss them as I was reading it. I was like, Tyrion, Jon, yes. A forewarning, if I mispronounce any of these Greek names, I'm sorry. I'm going to pronounce them as I read them in my head. And if that's wrong, please correct me politely. I did Google one of their names, but I forgot it because it was last night. The first 5-star book is The Song of Achilles. Oh my God. What can I say about this book that hasn't already been said? It is a retelling of the famous Achilles and Patroclus. That's how I read it in my mind. Patroclus. Wow. This book, once again, made me sob. I'm going to say that so many times in this video, but it really did. It broke my heart. It also made me believe in love again. Their love story was so amazing and inspiring and breathtaking and heartbreaking, and I haven't shipped 2 characters together so much in a long time. The story itself was so fantastical and adventurous and immersing. Immersing. And I truly felt like I was living in ancient Greece. I felt like I was there with them. I felt like I was going on all these adventures and quests and battles with our main characters. I loved her writing. I thought that for a debut, I'm pretty sure this is her debut, the writing was phenomenal and it was so just beautiful. I also, for this one and Cersei, I loved seeing some famous heroes pop in and interact with our main guys. I loved that. It was like kind of a fangirl moment for me. Yes. One of my new favorites. It's on my favorites shelf. So, wow, a surprise. Cersei. It's a retelling of Cersei. My Percy Jackson self was kind of giddy about this. With both of these, I was like reliving my love for Percy Jackson. And it really made me want to reread Percy Jackson. That's going to be one of my goals for 2021. This one wasn't as good as The Song of Achilles, but it was definitely still amazing. I was so invested in her story and her upbringing and her background and her love life, and it was very interesting to see how she grew from this little girl, just kind of an average little girl, into this amazing, powerful, mystical woman that we all know or have like heard of before. I loved all her interactions with some heroes and famous people and how they're connected. One thing that kind of not made me dislike it, but made me like it less than the Song of Achilles was I didn't really get truly like fully invested in her story until a little before halfway. I didn't find it as engaging as the Song of Achilles. I mean, it was still beautiful and interesting, but I just connected with the characters in the Song of Achilles more quickly and more thoroughly, but Cersei's story still made me cry. The next one, again, I don't know if you noticed it missing behind me, but Queen of Air and Darkness, the third and final book in the Dark Artifices trilogy, which is a part of the Shadowhunter Chronicles. If you don't know or haven't heard of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, I don't know what to tell you, you know? Half human, half angels, fighting demons, falling in love, fulfilling their destinies, fighting evil. Yeah, this, could you tell? I love the Shadowhunter Chronicles, and I had been waiting to read this for a very long time because I waited to get all of them in paperback. So, Queen of Air and Darkness. It's not necessarily my favorite of her books, but it's definitely up there. And I think it's her most sophisticated work. I loved it. I really did. I appreciated the depictions of grief and dealing with the loss of a loved one. I felt they were very relatable, and I thought that she did a good job of showing how every single person has a different way of dealing with grief and overcoming it. And I thought that was a very important aspect of this book because it led a lot of characters down different paths, and it fueled a lot of their actions. So I really, really enjoyed that part of it. Well, not enjoyed, because it absolutely broke my heart, but I greatly appreciated it, and it definitely added to my reading experience. I could tell reading it that every single conversation, whether or not it was a side conversation or like just a comment thrown in there, every single plot point, every single action the characters made, every single decision was so well thought out and planned and choreographed and well executed. And I really, really appreciated that. But I could just tell that she's been planning this for so long, and she wrapped it up so nicely. I loved the direction she took our characters. I loved seeing some of the OG faves. I sat on the couch and giggled and screamed and just absolutely lost my shit so many times reading this book. I also loved the direction she took the political plot. This undercurrent of politics and government and corruption has always been there, but it really came to a head in this novel, and I thought she handled it beautifully. So much happened in this. I can't even convey all my feelings. All my notes, all my reading notes, literally they were like a page and a half long in a Google Doc. So trying to convey all of my feelings without spoilers and in a timely manner is very hard. So I'm just going to put it down. Ooh, the next book. Wow. The next book is All the Light We Cannot See. Holy cow. Did I cry? This book follows a young, blind French girl and a German soldier throughout World War II. So let me give you a little bit of backstory about this book. In my junior year of high school, I sat next to a friend who also loved to read, and we would always talk about the books we were reading, whatever. And so one day I noticed her reading this, and look at the cover, it's beautiful. So obviously I noticed it, and I had noticed she had been reading it for like a month and a half, 2 months. So I was like, what book is that? And she was like, it's All the Light We Cannot See. And she starts telling me about it, and she goes, it's so difficult to read. It's amazing and beautiful, and I love it, but it's hard to read, and it's taking me so long to plow through. Then I went to a bookstore, like last year, and saw it, and I was like, I want to read it. I was a little scared to begin reading it because of her warnings. I really loved this book. It was beautiful. The writing was so refreshing and unique. I don't know another adjective to describe it, but beautiful and like astronomical. I don't know where that word came from, but the military jargon and the technological electrical terminology did kind of throw me for a loop, as did the French. I was able to look past it because everything else was so exceptional and the rest of the writing was so amazing. So but it did take me a while to kind of get used to it. I was equally invested in both of our main characters' stories. Usually I find in stories with multiple characters and multiple point of views that, you know, there's always the one that you get to where you go, oh, I don't want to read this right now. This book, I did not find that to be true. I found all of the point of views equally as interesting, especially the inclusion of people outside of the two main characters. I found their perspectives to be enlightening. Definitely made me more anxious reading some other people's point of views. Even though the end absolutely broke my heart, I did think it wrapped up rather nicely. The last little bit of this book goes through a lot of the characters and shows where they are like 30 years, I think, in the future. And I really enjoyed seeing where they all ended up, seeing how their lives played out. It definitely showed how different people respond to different traumatic events, such as a terrible, terrible war, and how it affects them the rest of their lives. Ooh, the next one. Okay. Oh, this book. The next book is Hollow Pox, The Hunt for Morgan. I don't know how to say her name. I say Morgan in my head. Morgan Crow, which is the third book in a series of I don't know how many books. The overall premise for this series, or at least the first book, is a cursed little girl, she's like 10 in the first book, is destined to die on her birthday until a magical, mysterious man shows up and saves her and takes her to this fairyland place, and she competes to be in a magical school / magical society. This series is so good. Oh my god, nothing compares in my opinion. It's magical, it's beautiful, the characters are so diverse and complex and unique. This book is probably, I don't know if it could surpass Nevermore, the first one, because I love that book so much, but it came pretty damn close. Every book is a year of her life, all of their celebrations and rituals and festivals. In every book there's something different and something new about them and something new to love and to be excited about. And I love that aspect of it. It just makes it feel all the more realistic and like we're living her life with her. I love Morgan as a protagonist. I love all the main characters of these novels. I really do. Even the villain, I love. I've greatly enjoyed seeing Morgan progress as a character and just become more mature and confident, and she's getting older, and so she's learning about new things. Every single novel, there's another mystery and there's another thing to solve that guides pretty much the whole book. I loved all the new information we got in this book. Probably my favorite thing about this book is the fact that we're finally getting a glance at Morgan's future and what could be down the road, and it's very exciting to see, but I'm also very nervous. It kind of feels like the turn in Goblet of Fire, where you're starting to pick up on how dark the story's going to go. But I loved that, and I loved that Morgan's, as she's getting older, is having to overcome some dark, troubling things. The next book I do not have a physical copy of, unfortunately, but it is If We Were Villains. I really greatly enjoyed this book. It exceeded all my expectations. It went in places I never could have thought it would have gone. So this book is about 7 aspiring young actors and actresses who are in this prestigious school, college, university, whatever, and their life revolves around performing Shakespeare's plays. That's like their focus. And their lives tragically reflect the themes and what happens in Shakespeare's plays. As a person who does not enjoy Shakespeare, I do not enjoy reading Shakespearean plays. I really do not. I greatly enjoyed this book, despite it, because of it. I do think if you have read Macbeth and Hamlet, you have some background knowledge, even if you like didn't read them but you studied them in class and have like a vague notion of what happens, it's easier to draw the connections between them and the characters and the plays and whatever and what's happening in their lives. It was very atmospheric, this school seclusion, dark academia setting. It was so fun and enjoyable and sad. Oh, I forgot to mention, part of the major plot is that one of the actors dies. And so you're trying to figure out, how did they die? Who might have killed them? Why they were killed? And it goes downhill very fast. It escalates really quick. And I did not see the end coming. I did not unravel the mystery at all. I really enjoyed the prose. It was magical and beautiful and whimsical. The complex and dynamic relationships between the actors and their family and their teachers was so interesting to read about. I loved the romance. If you've read this, you know which romance I'm talking about because there are quite a few. I loved them. Oliver, arguably the most important character, our narrator, pretty sure, is so lovable and relatable and frustrating at times. He's so deeply flawed and just complex as any normal human would be. And I really, really loved him as a protagonist. Dark Dawn, the third and final book of the Nevernight trilogy series. This story follows a assassin who is determined to avenge her family. I loved this trilogy, but this was by far my favorite book. I greatly appreciated how within like the first 60 pages or something of this book, we got answers and long-awaited answers to many questions, and we got some explanations. I loved the new characters we were introduced to. I felt like they added a lot to the story. Even as other characters died, we got some new ones. I cried a lot. The end really made me cry. The romance, I actually was not a fan of for the majority of these novels, but by the end, holy cow, was I a fan. The fight scenes were epic. The battles were suspenseful and well executed, and we got to see Mia hand a lot of asses to a lot of people, and it was awesome. It was so great. I I hadn't been as excited to see some well-deserved fight scenes probably since I read Kingdom of Ash. This book was so tense, but it was still so much fun and funny and lovable. And I loved the direction he took the story. At first I was a little scared, but I thought he wrapped everything up very nicely, and he left characters off where I wanted them to be left off. I thought it was a very satisfying ending to a really good trilogy. The next book. Ready Player One. This is a story about a young man, Wade Watts, who is sucked into this life-altering, mind-blowing competition, which, if he wins, will change the rest of his life. I could not put it down. I didn't watch any TV, I didn't watch any movies. When I had spare time, my nose was stuck in this book. I would read it for hours on end. It was so good, and I was so attached and invested in Wade's story, and I rooted for him the entire time, even when he ticked me off, and he did tick me off. But all the time I was rooting for him and fascinated with his character and where the story would go. One of the things that lessens my experience with dystopians, and I'm not sure if this is more dystopian or sci-fi, I found it to be more dystopian, but is the fact that it's hard to see how the earth got there and how society got there to the point where it is. And this was not hard at all to imagine and to place yourself in his shoes. There was a lot of technology, jargon, and video game stuff. As someone who has only played like Wii games and Minecraft, I did not find that it took away from the experience. The pop culture references from the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s were awesome, even though a lot of them I did not understand. It was definitely a nerdy book, but it was written in such a way, and you could tell that Klein was so passionate about everything he was speaking of, and that he has an abundance of knowledge on this topic, or he did his research really well, or both, that it carried out kind of like when you have a really good teacher or professor who's passionate about their subject, and it makes you in turn more interested and more engaged. That's what this did for me. The end and the climax was so intense, and I was so scared, but it was awesome, and I think that they wrapped it up nicely. When I finished this, I smiled. I was smiling. I was grinning, genuinely grinning so big, and that has not happened in a long time. So if you've made it this far, I'm impressed with you. Thank you. The next book is Muse of Nightmares, which is the second and final book in the Strange the Dreamer, I always say this wrong, duology. Wow, I love this duology. I really do. It was stunning and beautiful. It's hard to describe, like give a concise description on the main points, but I'm going to try. So the first one, and this one, follows the children of gods and a normal librarian as they try to navigate their mysterious world, and especially as they try to solve the mystery of how a huge statue that hovers in the air made out of metal came to be and why it's there. I've said this a lot. I loved it. I thought it was one of the best conclusions to any series I've ever read. That's a big statement right there. It was so satisfying and heartbreaking. Once again, I cried a lot. And amazing and beautiful, and the writing was just as good as Strange the Dreamer, and I loved Strange the Dreamer. This one probably doesn't quite match my love for Strange the Dreamer, but do the sequels ever. I was so glad that all of my questions were answered, and that she pretty much addressed every single thing I was confused about. I loved the direction that all of our characters went in, and how they matured and progressed, and how their relationships were furthered. I loved all the new point of views we got from different characters. I felt it added a lot to the story, and it tied everything together nicely. The writing is just, it's so mesmerizing and whimsical and magical and beautiful and lyrical, and the descriptions are so rich, and the imagery is so stunning and striking, and the story and the world and the magic itself is so unique, and it was very refreshing, and I just loved it. The last book I finished not too long ago, I think it was like 4 days ago, and I do not have a physical copy of, is The Starless C. As a person who loved The Night Circus, which is Erin Morgenstern's other novel, like that is one of my favorite all-time books, I was apprehensive to read Starless C because its rating on Goodreads is not low, but it's lower than I would have expected. This book is about a man who finds a mysterious, authorless book in his university library, which happens to contain a story that happened to him. Like, one of the most memorable parts of his childhood is in this book that is filled with other fantastical, strange stories. And so after finding this book, he is led down an adventurous, magical, scary, thrilling, heartbreaking path. This book did take me a while to get into. I would say probably about 50% in is when it really started to pick up. I think it would have been beneficial to me as a reader, based on my reading preferences, to read this book in a physical copy. I think it would have been easier to keep track of everything that was happening. Definitely got easier to keep track of the more I got into it and the more invested I became. I love Zachary and everyone else in this book too, but Zachary, man, I loved him. He was a great protagonist. I don't think there was one time that I was like even remotely mad at him or frustrated with him. He was so lovable and so smart and cunning and witty and just an all-around good human being. I love the writing of this book. She has a certain style that is so mysterious and leaves you guessing, and it's magical and mysterious. I've already said mysterious. And it's magical and lyrical and so descriptive and immersive. And one thing that I really enjoyed about The Night Circus, and especially this book, is that while you're reading, even though you may be confused for a large part of the book, you get the sense of what's going on, but you don't know for sure. So you're all the more interested to see what's actually happening. I think that's it. I loved The Starless C, I really did. I think that's it, which is kind of crazy to me. I hope you guys had a fantastic past week and that it brought you much needed happiness, because I know we all need a little bit of happiness right now. And even if it didn't, there are always good books out there to comfort you and to pull you out of reality for a little while. And these books definitely did that for me, and I loved all of them. I really did. Thank you for staying this long. I don't know how long this video is going to be because I've rambled so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what some of your favorite books were this year that you read. Yeah, I hope you guys have a Merry New Year's, a Happy New Year's, that you spend it safely and you're all well and healthy and your families are all well and healthy. And I hope that I'll see you next time. Goodbye.